listening to the stories this evening it's really moved me, and I've come to know Jody a little bit here in the past few months, and we're working together on some exciting initiatives for our community. But hearing your story, Terrence and Tequila, brings me to tears to hear that, because what we do in our work is we're on the legal side of things. We're defending people in court, but we know that everybody has a story and everybody has a history that brought them to this moment where they're there in the criminal justice system. And our job as public defenders is to try to communicate that to a prosecutor, to a judge, to get them to see the person and not just the crime that the person may have committed, or is often committed when we're representing people. A lot of the people have committed the crime, as Jody said, she did her crime. But that's not the whole story. The whole story is, how did she get there? What do we do next? What can we do to try to get this person, yes, get justice for victims, and yes, try to make things right, but also to think more about, how do we get this person back into our community, back into our lives? Because Jody used the term collateral consequences to conviction. They're really embedded consequences. They're not collateral at all. They're 100% embedded in the conviction. And there are so many barriers to getting back to life and being part of the community and being successful. And just hearing your stories in person, in this context, has really helped inspire me to go back to the people that I work with to try to inspire them, or in some cases re-inspire them, because you can get burnt out being a public defender for many years, to re-inspire them to advocate for the person and for what justice calls for, which is getting that person back into our community and back being successful. So, I'll take just 1 minute to tell my story. My story is, I didn't come from Gardenia or anywhere like that. I came from a pretty upper middle class background. My dad was a lawyer. He has a big law firm. He was in the state senate for many years. He wanted me to be a lawyer. He wanted me to be a corporate lawyer, to be a Republican, for God's sakes. And to go and do that. And it would have been so easy to do that. We had it all mapped out. I just have to do this. I just have to go to law school. I could walk right in to a $150,000 a year job starting out and be a partner in the firm that bears his name. And that just wasn't me. That wasn't me. There was something inside of me that called me to help the underdog, to help people who were not as fortunate as me. And so when I came to school and I came to law school and I did, excuse me, my mouth's a little dry, when I did the public defender clinic at the law school, it crystallized. I said, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help people. I want to help people who come from, in general, a very different background than I had experienced. But I saw the injustice, I saw the unfairness, and I saw people who needed help. And that's what drew me to become a public defender. My first job was actually as a prosecutor, which was way weird, because I just needed a job, and they had one. and so, I started working there. And but after a couple years, my heart called me back, and I was able to get a job at the public defender's office. And Rick Parker, our longtime former public defender and my longtime boss, hired me, and it just went from there. And so as I've worked through that office and all these years, we've stood in front of judges, mostly old white guys, that we try to explain, hey, police pull people over for no reason. They pull them over because they're black. They lie about the reason because they had a suspicion something else was going on, and we're here in a motion to suppress, and we need you to believe that the tag light wasn't out, that this was all a pretext for something else. And, I don't know how many times we've stood there and they don't believe it. And I don't know how many times we've stood there with the client who knew they weren't going to be believed. They weren't going to be believed. And how many times people pled out to cases before they ever went to litigation because they're like, I'm not going to be believed. And I can't take the risk. I can't take the risk of going to prison. I got to take the plea offer because what could happen otherwise is too great. And so when you're in there battling on a daily basis, you can get discouraged, you get inspired at times by your victories, by the instances where you actually could prove that the officer was lying, and sometimes it takes video. God bless the body cam, because, before body cams, something concrete that we could show that an injustice occurred and we could prevent it from continuing on through the system. So when I became the elected public defender, my mission changed a little. My mission's changed from direct client representation to let's bring it out forward. What can we do to make things better in Tallahassee? So I do a lot up there in advocating. And when you really look at it from a global perspective, you see how complicated it is to try to fix it. There's no one answer. There's no one solution. It's going to take a comprehensive approach to even begin to try to fix it. I'll just throw a couple of other statistics out there. Aside from the local ones that you heard earlier, we have the third largest prison population in the state of Florida, hovering around 100,000 people in prison. We spend about $2.3 billion a year on our prison system, and that's increased by $100 million since 2014 alone. The sentencing lengths are up by 22%. The length of stay is up by 18%. And that's in large part due to minimum mandatory punishments, of which we have about 106 different minimum mandatory sentences in the state of Florida. About 47 of them relate to drug crimes alone. 63% of the admissions to prison in 2016 was for nonviolent offenses. The elderly prison population is up 65% in the last decade. So all these mandatory sentences, 25 years to life, we have a lot of geriatric prisoners in prison. Old men, walkers, going around the prison, and we're paying for their health care, and they're not a risk to reoffend, but yet they can't get out because of draconian policies like the 85% rule, where everybody has to serve 85% of their sentence, even if it isn't a minimum mandatory, or the minimum mandatory sentences where people have to serve 100% day for day. And it just doesn't make sense to continue with these policies. And so one of the things that the Public Defender Association does and that I do on their behalf is advocate for smart criminal justice reforms. And you know what it takes to get those passed? It takes legislators who understand the issues and who are willing to look at the facts instead of just reacting emotionally to be tough on crime and over-relying on incarceration as the solution to everything. Because that's really what has gotten us here. It's like, we're going to be tough on crime. We need everybody to go to prison for a long time, and that's what's going to solve our problem. Well, the data doesn't support that. The data doesn't support it, and we can't afford it, not only financially, which is the only thing that really rings true with some of our more conservative friends, the money, but it also the cost to people of being ground up in the system, the cost to our communities and to our kids, and all this money that we're investing on the back end to punish and incarcerate instead of investing it on the front end to try to help people to not get it. So what can we do? I mean, one of the first things we need to do is we need to vote. We need to have candidates that are going to hear judges who will hear us and understand that we can elect. We need to serve on juries. So many people come to jury selection, they're like, I can't do it, I've got to work, and I don't want to come, and we're like, no, we need you to come, and I know you all probably do, but we need people on our juries who understand what people go through, understand the issues, and have a heart to listen to the facts. We got to pass Amendment 4. I mean, we've got to let people come back and come back to our community and to vote. Some of the other criminal justice reforms, and I'll try to wrap it up so we can hear from Chief Jones. The other things we're trying to get done is to reclassify felony drug possessions down to misdemeanors. Some states have already done this. I mean, we're behind states like Tennessee, Utah, Iowa, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and so we need to take it down a notch and reclassify some of these felonies. We need to increase the felony theft threshold. Yes. Right now it's $300. Well, it has never been adjusted in decades, so we need to increase it at least to $1,500. There were 1,000 prison admissions in 2016 with over 2 year sentences each for felony petty theft. We're behind Texas. Texas' felony threshold is $2,500. We're behind Georgia, which is $1,500, and Alabama, which is $1,500. We almost got it passed last year, and the Retail Association always is against it and ends up killing it at the last minute. But we're getting closer. Now this is kind of a controversial one, I think, but it's important, and I think you all will understand. We need to narrow drug-free zone enhancements. Okay, so right now, if you're within 1,000 feet of a church or a school or other designated zones, mere possession can turn into possession within that zone that turns into a minimum mandatory sentence. Well, that sounds great, right? Because we don't want drugs near our playground. We don't want drugs near our schools. We don't want, drugs near churches. But the unintended consequence of that is over-incarceration, particularly of minorities and black people who tend to be concentrated in urban centers where these zones are everywhere. It's almost impossible to not be in a zone. And so it has the effect of over-incarceration for people in those communities with longer sentences for the same crime, a possession of cocaine or felony amount of marijuana, that if you were out in the country, it might have been a misdemeanor, or it might have been simple possession that you could have got deferred. So that's an issue that's out there. We need to reduce minimum mandatories, deal with the 85% rule, and we need to incentivize inmates to participate in programs by offering earlier release or earned credit, so that there's a reason to, beyond the inner reasons that you all found when you were there to get better and to do better. Some people might need an external incentive to get out earlier and to work to get out. And we need, in our community, expand access to alternatives to incarceration.
Really.
So I know Hart and the River Phoenix Center is working on other alternatives such as restorative justice to try to bring victims and offenders together to find out better ways to deal with what happened and to come to terms with it and to find solutions so it doesn't happen again. And also diversion programs, we have some here. We need to expand them. We need to expand it to have fewer people being arrested for minor offenses, and we're working towards some success with that, but we have a long way to go. And just finding other ways to deal with when crimes are committed other than just saying, put them in jail. And if we can do that together as a community, we can make everything better. And I'll close with a couple things that we're doing at the Public Defender's Office to try to incorporate these ideas. we're trying to move towards a holistic defense model. Traditional criminal defense is, we deal with the facts, we have some mitigation, we deal with the legal issues, and we go to court. We brought the Bronx defenders down for a training. I know Jody came to try to teach us about how to look at the person and all of the things that they need and all of the lack of resources that they have and the needs that they have beyond our case to try to help us get the judge to see them in the right light as a person and not a file, to help get better outcomes and to help the person be more successful if they're put on probation, to make sure that they're successful, because you're not going to be successful if you don't have a place to live and if you don't have a way to get a job or to pay your court fees. So we're working towards that. We're going to be working with Jody on a community model of how to get community members and family members of people who are going through the system to help support them and support the families to get them through the criminal justice system and to come up with better outcomes. So I'm excited and I'm inspired, and I thank you for having me.